There we go. Thanks for that, Mo. These are the obvious things that we can use to bridge the gap, but just thinking about how do we take things beyond obvious. And the phrase beyond obvious is a phrase that I use a lot with senior leaders. What's beyond obvious here? How can we take this beyond obvious so that we start to differentiate between the two? And that's really, really important. So that's the first thing that I want to share with everybody today. But as always, those of you that know me, bridging the gap, humanizing transformation. Let's talk about beyond obvious for the rest of today's session, Mel, of course. So these are the 5 things. These are the 5 ways that we help everybody come onto the same page. And of course, I'm not saying that they're the only 5 things. It's just 5 things that I've picked that I think are valuable and potent, certainly things that we use within the framework, the Dilyn Way framework for humanizing transformation. And they are so super important. They can take you from stuck to unstuck. They can accelerate. They can really help bring people on the same page. The first thing we're going to talk about is participation versus separation. Next one is mandate versus modeling, working backwards versus stepping away, hearts and minds, which is probably an obvious one that, for humanizing transformation. And the final thing that I'm going to share with everybody is this: define unity as opposed to allowing false prophets to speak and be loudly heard. So that is really, really important. So I'm going to talk through each one of these. So the first one, participation versus separation. Well, what do I mean by that? Well, the thing that I mean here is this. If we think about all of the users, the total universe of users impacted by the transformational change that we are working on, that is our total universe. And thinking about everybody, what we tend to do is we tend to see practitioners or people that might be part of learning and development, change agents, more loosely speaking, and leaders themselves as outside of that universe of transformational change. And a lot of the time we ourselves as practitioners, or if anybody on today's call is a senior leader, we might feel that we are doing this too, or even at best with. And, for all the best intentions, even doing it with somebody is not necessarily as deep as we should go. So there's a separation. There's a separation between these two things, the practitioners, the agents of change, and the leaders, that just, it just doesn't work. So what do we mean by participation? Every time we work with practitioners and with senior leaders, we spend time to help them to understand that we are all at the center of change, that we are participants. The moment that we introduce change, even if it's our vision and strategy, and we feel that we're disconnected from its implementation, we are a part of it, because there is a vibe and an energy. So we are always at the center of change, as well as all of our users. If we are able to see ourselves as a participant, if we are able to support our leaders to also see themselves as participants of the change, and not necessarily as directors of an orchestra, separate too, but seeing us all as an evolving system, that is a huge change. That's a mindset shift. That's using some of the work and techniques that we do around modern mindset shift in order to support all of the change practitioners and the technical people and the data scientists, all of these people, to understand alongside the leaders that we are all at the center of change. We're all participants in this. The next one is mandates versus modeling. Oh my goodness, isn't this interesting? Slightly similar to the first one, participation, but not quite. There's still a nuance here. And the nuance here is this: at the end of the day, when we're involved in change and transformation, we all recognize, and I'm sure we've all got our stories of recognizing that culture shifts by looking up. And when the culture looks up and they can't see anything enough to trust in it, then by default, there is a level of distrust. And there is a level, therefore, with lack of trust, of resistance. So it's incredibly important for us to think about ways of how, when the culture looks up, there is something for them to see and trust. And that seeing and trusting comes, of course, predominantly from the leaders themselves. And that is through role modeling. And it's so incredibly important for anyone working in the world of change and transformation, if there is a motivation to humanize that change and transformation, which for us, every change and transformation should be humanized, is really important to, to prioritize the work with our senior leaders to enable them to start role modeling. If there is an essence of the future in the behavior and in the narrative and the words of the leaders, that's enough to just build a tiny bit of trust, and working with the leaders to role model. And ourselves as practitioners has changed as well, for us to understand how we can role model. It doesn't matter what the change and transformation is per se, but just for us to really understand, how do we become a role model in some of the words and the language and the actions and the behaviors that can support fostering trust within the users that we're working with. It's so incredibly important, time and again, for us, the role modeling element, as opposed to mandating, this is the strategy, this is the vision, and go forth and multiply. That just, doesn't work in the world that we live in today. Being the change that we want to see in others, goodness gracious me, it does sound like a little bit of a cliche, doesn't it? But it's so incredibly important, because it allows us to foster that sense of followership. And if we can foster a sense of followership, we are on the journey of repositioning projects and programs as people movements. And if we are leading transformation, that is something for us that really should be a measure of success. How we are able to, for the users, position projects and programs, an entire portfolio, as a set of people movements. And when we talk about followership, there's just something just to remind everybody here. We use the word followership not in terms of sheep blindly following sheep, but role modeling in leaders and in practitioners allows the building up of trust, the groundswell of that people movement, for individuals to follow their own path. So it's not to follow and copy blindly what somebody else is doing per se, but it's then to say, gosh, therefore I can be my own truth. I can step into my future shoes. I can be the best that I can be also as part of this transformation. So really important. And by the way, as I'm going through all of these things today, clearly there's a techniques and a wealth of framework and approach behind all of these elements. So if there's anything here that you'd like to know a little bit more about, then please do reach out to me after today's session. So role modeling and finding the people to be the role models, the innovators in the curve of diffusion of change perhaps, fit into three audience groups for us. The first one, which is the most obvious, and I've already mentioned it, the senior leaders, the people that are leaders by label in our organization, the senior leadership, the directors, the C-suite, etc., and even in some situations, certainly in third sector and charity, the board members as well. And then we've got the practitioners, the people themselves that are the change agents. And this isn't just project management. This isn't just the PMO. This isn't just the change managers. This is learning and development, organizational design, technology, etc., etc. So these are all the agents of change, all of those people that are employed as part of operational change in some way, shape, or form. And the third element, the third audience group of role models, are what we call positive energizers. And there's a huge amount of work that you can do to identify the positive energizers, but this is probably what you might call champions. And champions are not necessarily the people that are the people with the expertise and the experience, but they are people that are the honeypots. And the bees just come to that honeypot. So how do we understand and how do we identify who those positive energizers are? And a lot of this work comes from the work of Kim Cameron in Michigan University in the US, who has for the last couple of decades been doing some fantastic research and work around positive relational energy and how incredibly powerful that is in journeys of transformation, and especially in large, complex organizational systems. So the next element for me to share with you today is this sense of working back versus stepping away. And I don't know how many of you have seen the Amazon book Working Backwards. It's a little bit like that, but equally there's a nuance to it that we talk about. So what does working back versus stepping away mean in order to bring everybody on the same page? Well, if we think about it, what tends to happen a lot of the time when we are stepping away is we're looking at improvement, and we're helping people understand where they're at, and then we're encouraging people to improve towards a future, and we want people to step away from where they are. So we want them to improve and we want them to move. But what tends to happen here when people step away from where they are is they take one step in a direction that could be in many directions. It could be north, south, east, or west. And it's incredibly hard for us to really start to map and understand which way they've gone. And a lot of the time when we're in change and transformation, we think that it's okay to get people to move from where they are, to understand where they are, and to shift one step from there to improve it. But actually, we don't know which direction they're going in. So we can take many different steps, single steps, in terms of teams and departments and service areas and lines of business if we're in a large corporate, and people are taking one step in different directions. Now, if we're really wanting everybody to be on the same page across service areas, across lines of business and divisions, across different geographies, then the way to do it is really to focus on the future in a way that humanizes it, that we get everybody on the same page based on a vision of who we are becoming. And a lot of the time, what we tend to find that vision and strategy stop at that point and then translate straight into projects and programs and initiatives, whereas there's actually some work to be done to get the humans on the same page, to turn visions and strategies into something that allows them to connect with it, that allows human beings to connect with our future. And that's all about who we are becoming. And what we talk about here is we talk about what's called a moonshot positioning. And again, if you'd like to know a little bit more about that, then please do reach out to us. This is one of my Wednesday mornings that some of you that have been on my Wednesday mornings before, this is big information dump, right? Sometimes we do one thing and go really, really deep. Today is just really just sharing a lot of information with everybody. So the key thing here is, if we are able to absolutely understand what the future looks like based on a moonshot, which is an identity of who we are becoming, not what we are going to be doing as an organization, not what you need to be doing as an individual employee within this organization or a team or a department, but who are we as an identity, as a human identity. That's what moonshot positioning is all about. When we are able to visualize and clarify and communicate to people who we are becoming, and people can get a sense of belonging, what we can then do is we can do what's called working back. We can work backwards from that point. So instead of thinking about where we are now and taking a step away from where we are to make it better, to make it smarter, to make it faster, we don't do that anymore. What we do is, everybody's got a sense of the identity of who they are becoming in the future. So what we do is we reverse engineer it. And we reverse engineer until it gets so close to where we are now, it gets into what we call a zone of Maya. And then we design. So we always design from the future and bring it as close to now and step into the future. What's beautiful about this is, not only does it get everybody on the same page, but if we are working backwards from the future as we are stepping, rather than just going efficiency, faster, smarter in any direction. What that means is when external forces come into play, somebody's gone on long-term ill, the CEO or the leader of the PMO, or so our SRO has just resigned, or there's something like COVID or Brexit or bushfires in Australia. We work a lot with the Australian government. We had to go through a lot of this stuff. These external pernicious influences that happen, we can still keep journeying towards where we are becoming, because we are connected to it, because there's a sense of identity there. So shifting that future allows us to bring everybody on the same journey, even if there's big things happening. So you might have, you know, the team over in India might have got a lot of stuff going on for them at the moment, but they will still be able to navigate towards that moonshot alongside everybody else, keeping on the same page. Super, super, super important. The next thing that I want to talk about is hearts versus minds. And this is probably something that you kind of go, well, if you're going to humanize transformation, we're going to get everybody on the same page. I kind of get that. And again, it plays into what I've just been sharing with you. Really, really important. But the thing, goodness gracious, you know, to capture hearts and minds, to get everybody on the same page is so important. It's so important. And the way, sometimes the way to do it is so simple and so minimal in terms of the effort, and yet the impact is so powerful that I don't quite understand why we don't do this by default. And an easy way to look at it, one way that we can capture hearts over minds, is to think about these two things: the language of the organization, or the language of change and transformation, and human narrative. And if we think about organizational language, certainly around transformation, absolutely, we have visions and we have strategies. That language connects to the organization. It's not human. You know, it's about what we need to do. It's the structure and the scaffolding of what. It's always the what. And that really is very, very, very structural. Doesn't necessarily capture hearts and minds. But if we are able to translate our vision and our strategy into a moonshot and a set of beliefs, then wow, does the magic happen? Because what that does is it allows us to support what I said just earlier, is it allows us to identify and to get people to understand who we are becoming as a result of this transformation, rather than what I need to do. I'm being told this is what I need to do. This is what we are going to do as a result of this transformation. Doesn't capture necessarily the heart, but it only really tries to capture the mind. So we need to do both of those things. So moonshot is where we are really talking about who we are becoming collectively, the future self of the human system. Beliefs are slightly different. And there is actually a large financial organization who has actually worked on belief statements. So what they've done is they have literally worked with the leadership team, and instead of having vision and strategy, they've worked with the leadership team to agree and unite on a set of belief statements, and then worked with the leadership team and supported them to integrate and embed and bake these beliefs, these belief narratives into their own narrative, into their leadership narrative. And you know, so we believe that this transformation will allow us to, we believe that we will become as a result of, and just very, very simply getting the leaders to just bake in belief statements into their narrative is an amazing, simple way of capturing hearts, rather than just focusing on the mind element. So, so powerful. The next thing I want to talk about is this sense of defined unity and false prophets. This is an interesting one. I was working with a senior leadership team last week, and we were in a conversation around the transformation and the appetite for transformation and the ambition and need for transformation in terms of radical shift and transformation as difference versus change as improvement. And it was very, very interesting because everybody was nodding their head and we were saying, yep, we're all on the same page with this. And we started talking about what does it mean for us, therefore, to, be radical and to start to articulate and really understand the human identity vis-a-vis radical transformation. And what was really interesting was this: several senior leaders, chief officers in that room said to me, "But Mel, we're already doing some of this. We're already doing this stuff." Oh, okay. Can you explain that to me a little bit more? As they started to explain what they felt was innovative and radical and transformative was actually change and improvement, and not difference, but real efficiencies. And yet in their brains, they had thought that it was innovative, because there's a spectrum. There's always a spectrum. So the key thing around defined unity versus false profit is this: how do we ensure that we are able to challenge and apply critical thinking when our colleagues at a senior leadership level, or indeed within the practice of a project or program or portfolio, when we're using different words, that we are absolutely united on the definition of what those words mean, and that we are not therefore allowing false prophets to talk about, look at all of that wonderful innovative work that we were doing over in the finance department, when actually what it was just serving some efficiency. A great, fantastic project, but not necessarily difference, radical, innovative, or transformative. So it's really bridging the gap to get everybody on the same page. And there's some questions that we ask that I've just popped up on the slide here for everyone. It's just thinking, are there any areas in our narrative or in our understanding that could be a little bit blurred? That there might be a little bit of a spectrum here between what you think something is and what I think something is. So just understanding, the varying degrees of, we're already doing this. Is there a little bit of that you've got? And just understanding that. And once we kind of understand these two first points, then we can sit and define what we mean by some key narrative points. And we've done this quite a lot, and certainly with our work with the Australian government, with some of the agencies there, and the Digital Transformation Agency, is just sitting down and really just understanding the definition of, when something is innovative, it will tick these boxes. When something is efficient and improving, it's ticking these boxes. Understanding the difference between change and transformation. Do we need to have a definition for each one of those words, or are they the same? And if they are the same, well, at least do we know what that actually means? So it's important for us to recognize what definitions we want to unite around, because what that does is it really allows us to start to bring everybody on the same page. And as I say, right at the very top of the food chain, as I was in conversation only last week, we recognized that even at that point, we were not on the same page. We thought we were, but actually we were false profiteering innovation versus improvement. So it's incredibly important, some of this groundwork for us when we're working on the journey. So those are the things that I wanted to share with everybody today. And I know that we are just, past the hour, but there's something else that I want to share with everybody before I just bring today's session to a close. And it's this. In our work, what we've also recognized is that in many instances, it's quite healthy to rethink the word resilience and how we approach and position resilience as part of change and transformation. And there's two ways. The first thing for us is, instead of talking about how do we help people become more resilient, what we do is we kind of talk with customers and we say, You know, when you're implementing a new technology, well, it's standard practice for you to build in resilience, and you build in resilience around it. And that building in resilience around something is to ensure that you have got a right maintenance in play, that you're able to, address updates, and you've got provision for updates, etc., and new versions, etc., etc. So when we're building in resilience from a technological perspective, there's standard practice there. What would happen if we did exactly the same for the human side of transformation? So instead of saying, how do we help you to become more resilient? How do we help you build resilience into your ways of working, into your practice, so it becomes an evolving thing? It's part of your practice. So you are building that resilience. You've got your own habits and your own techniques to maintain resilience and to evolve. That's really, really important. And the other thing as well is we're playing around with this second point that you can see on the slide at the moment. There's a sense, and there's quite a lot of research around this as well, but there's this sense of when we do resilience work with individuals or teams around change and transformation, what we tend to do is we tend to get people to a state. And once I'm resilient, and there's a boundary and an end point to it. But actually, we all know that the only thing that's constant is change. And actually, the extremes of change define the complex world that we live in right now. So would it potentially be better for us to try and think about how we can support through learning and development and organizational design and coaching and mentoring, how we can support individuals and users through the journey of transformation to become anti-fragile? Because that means that it's expansive and it doesn't necessarily have a boundary. It's a very, very, very interesting world of exploration for us at the moment. And certainly some of the results and some of the feedback that we're getting around, shifting from becoming resilient to being anti-fragile are really, really positive. Everything that I've talked about today, of course, is part of the Dilyn Way framework approach and practice. So it's part of humanizing transformation. And if you or a member of your team, are involved in humanizing transformation, would like to know a little bit more about it, we do, of course, have our practitioner certification alongside our leadership programs and alongside our consulting and mentoring and coaching advisory. And if you'd like to know a little bit more, then please do reach out to me. And I've popped into the chat my Calendly link. So, have a look at that. We had a Black Friday deal last Friday on November the 25th, and we've extended that to this week. So if you'd like to know a little bit more about practitioner certification for yourself or for a member of your team, then we're more than happy to extend that. If you reach out and inquire this week, extend that Black Friday deal. But more importantly than sharing with you that everything that I've mentioned today is part of a framework that has an approach and is a practice for us as practitioners, for us as modern leaders, and wider across the organisation as users, I also always, every Wednesday, just reach out to everybody and say, if you would like to speak to me confidentially about where you are at now, or maybe a project or program of transformation you're working with, and you've just got some questions, you've just got some areas around humanizing it, maybe with the leaders, maybe with the team themselves, maybe with your own role modeling capacity, your own potential and possibility, then please do reach out to me. I always try and keep hold of my Thursday afternoons for conversations like this with fellow practitioners. Being purposefully driven rather than profit driven as an organization is so important for us to help as many practitioners or modern leaders in the theory of modern mindset as possible, because that's really what all of this work is about. It's all about modern mindset theory. So it's super, super, super important. Yes, I just noticed that the Calendly link is something that I just need to share again. So just bear with me 1 second. Thanks for putting that there, dear. I'll just do that now. I just send that. So that's in the chat for everybody. That's my calendar link. Please feel free. Absolutely no obligation. It's just your confidential mental coaching session. And that's open to everybody. So just in summary, what have we really talked about today? Well, what we've talked about today is getting people on the same page with transformation is really a key element of how we humanize transformation to accelerate success and to get a little bit agile at scale. And we've talked about 5 elements, talked about ourselves and the leaders as being a participant within the system. So not thinking about ourselves as separate, understanding that role modeling the future is a spark. Oh my goodness, it's the spark that ignites a fire. It's so important for us to have role modeling. And of course, mindsets, the modern mindset theory is really how we address that and develop that. Work backwards from a future state that is a human identity. So spending some time on who we are becoming, that's so incredibly important. And what that means is not only does it bring everybody onto the same page, but it can also help us stay on course. Capturing hearts to win over our mind at Humanising Transformation, so incredibly important. We talk about it, but do we really give it enough prioritization? Because a lot of the time, this stuff can feel really intangible and very difficult for us to actually raise into and integrate into, you know, our compliance, into our governance around change and transformation. But it is important for us to find ways to do so. And of course, uniting on key language and narrative so that we're negating that sense of mediocrity rules when it comes to, well, we're innovating over here, so we're all right. So we don't need to be worrying about all of that. So you can do it over there and you can do it with the rest of the organization, but we're okay over here. We're already doing it. You know, negate that sense of mediocrity. Let's unite on language, key narrative definitions. So incredibly important. Now, banana skins. Those of you that know me, I do it. I love it. I always talk about a couple of banana skins just to watch out. So if you've completely forgotten everything else that I've said today, just remember the banana skin so that you don't slip up. And something that is just, you know, something that I think is incredibly good practice for all of us in the world of change and transformation. First and foremost, see ourselves as being at the center of change. We're not on the periphery, we're not on the outside. With all of our intentions for good, we are a part of it. We are and should recognize that we are at the center of change and therefore participants. We vibe out, we are part of the ripple of it all. As soon as we are in there, we have a ripple effect. And secondly, you know, to watch out for that ill-defined future identity. If your change or transformation has got absolute clarity of what the organization will look like, or what the structure will look like, or what people ideally will be doing as a result of transformation, please do think about, how do I change that to who we are becoming as a result of? And one of the things that I will share here is you'll notice that through my narrative today, I've not said who will we become as a result of, it's who we are becoming. A lot of the time when we're thinking about change and transformation, we can fall or slip into a narrative that gives people an impression that there's an end state. But successful transformation is about sustainability, isn't it? It's about self-evolution after the fact, long after the project and the program and the budget has gone, and you know the technology is being deployed or the restructure has gone into play. Long after all of that, the humans in the system are still there, evolving and coping with this constancy of change. So our duty of care, but by creating that sense of who we are becoming, also allows us to understand that sustainability piece as well, to allow people as part of our legacy to be able to self-serve their evolution as a result of change and transformation. So incredibly important. So that's the end of today's weekly moment, today's session of throwing all of that stuff at you. So hopefully there's something, the spaghetti at the wall, again, that's a little quote of Jeff Bezos, isn't it, at Amazon? A lot of spaghetti at the wall. So hopefully there's something there that has stuck with you. So please do think about that. And you know, as a lasting kind of couple of thoughts, you know, are there any mismatches? Are there any gaps in your current project or transformation initiative that you're working in or leading at the moment? Do you feel there's mismatch? Do you feel there's gap there? And if so, are those gaps being filled by the human brains of the users? Or are you actually, you know, are you working with your colleagues? Is there rigor in there to ensure that you're bridging the gap using some of those techniques that I've already mentioned today that are, you know, about bringing the humans on the journey? So thinking about those things. So thank you everybody for joining me today. As always, the recording of today's session will be sent to you on email either today or at latest tomorrow. If you would like access to the slides as well, just respond to me on the email. Send a note to me and just put slides or whatever, no problem at all. And we'll also more than happily share the slides with you as well. So thank you everybody for joining today. I'm going to stop the record button now, but just to let everybody know, I'm going to hang around. So I'll be here until 10 a.m. So I've got another 12 minutes. So if you have any questions, then please do hang around, ask away. I'll just stop recording. But if you've got, you know, if you want to spend some time and just have a comfort break before you head into your 10 o'clock